everyone, PeachesJamesKeaton here with PJKNotary. Welcome to my channel. So those of you that have been in before, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for your support. Those of you, if this is your first time, welcome. My name is PeachesJamesKeaton. I am a Notary Public in the state of Nebraska. So what I want to talk to you guys about today, I just got done with a general notary appointment, and it actually went really interesting. I had a first today, and so a few weeks ago I created a video of 3 resources that have been really helpful for me when doing general notary work. So if you haven't checked out that video, check it out. But one of the things I talked about and suggested in that video was using or having with you your Notary Primer. You can get this at the National Notary Association website. It's not super expensive and it's actually come in great handy. So I'll talk about how I actually used it today. So I had recently actually attorneys starting to reach out via either my Google business page or on my website. So that's been interesting. They have been seeking out notaries for their clients. So that is actually how I got this appointment. It was his attorney setting it up. So when I got there at the appointment today, so it was just, he had to sign some documents for a property through someone that had passed away in his house. There was property and things being passed down to him when it came to a property. So it was documents, a couple affidavits in there. So that's kind of what the appointment was. It was super small. It was only like 10 pages that we had to go through. But when I got there, it was at a, he lived in kind of like a assisted living type of facility. So when I got there, you know, and asked him for his identification, he was like, you know what, I haven't driven for years. I don't have a valid driver's license. He didn't have a state non-driver's license. He didn't have a passport. So essentially he didn't have any of those. You know, of course, he's like, well, I have my, you know, Medicaid card. I have these other things that aren't acceptable forms of identification. So I knew in the state of Nebraska, and this is important to at least have a general sense of what your state laws are, and then the Notary Primer kind of as your supplemental resource to help you. I actually had one of my subscribers ask a really good question, you know, who said there's a lot. How do you remember it all? And you know, she was like, is it just your experience? And yes, experience is part of it. If you're doing something constantly, and you're constantly having the same scenarios, yes, you're going to start to know those things like the back of your hand. But there's so many other nuances and there's so many other scenarios that aren't very common and that we aren't going to come across. And so, yeah, it's hard to memorize every single state law that you have. You know, you might have at least the gist of it, but you're not going to have exactly the steps that are involved, because there is a lot to when it comes to notary law. And so and that's why I really like the Notary Primer, because it just gives me that second of like, I know we have, you know, a law that allows us to do this, but I don't remember the exact steps I need to take. And so that's exactly today. I'm like, okay, when I come across the scenario, he doesn't have identification, I know that I can utilize credible witnesses in Nebraska, and let me take out my primer and see, okay, what exactly do I need? So in Nebraska, there's actually a couple different things you can do to identify. We are able to use personal knowledge. So if I had personally known this individual, that would have been okay. The second thing, if he had one credible witness that I also personally knew, so someone who personally the notary knows and who personally knows the signer, I'm able to just do an oath and affirmation for that credible witness, and that would have been sufficient. But because there was no one at the facility that I knew personally, we had to use 2 credible identifying witnesses. So he was able to go get a couple people that know him personally, and as long as they had identification the acceptable identification and just affirmed that this individual is who they claim to be. That's how we were able to do it. So using those two credible identifying witnesses. And I'm also going to do another video too, just on, there's so many actually different types of witnesses and the different requirements. So I'm actually going to do a video on that, because we're going to come across all different types of witnesses that you need for wills versus witnesses requirements that might be needed on, like, say, your deed of trust, versus credible witnesses versus signature witnesses. So there's actually different types of witnesses, and you do have to know kind of what's required kind of in each scenario. So I was glad that I came across this, because again, the more experience you get with doing different types, you're going to start to remember how to do it. But this was the first time that I had an individual who did not have the proper identification, and having to take those next steps of, okay, how can I identify this person properly? And so yeah, we were able to do that. In that case, I did let the attorney know, because the attorney did want a copy of the ID. I just let her know, hey, this is what I had to do. We used two credible identifying witnesses in his case, because he did not have like a state ID, driver's license, or anything like that, passport, nothing of that nature. And so so in her case, she just wanted me to take a photo of if any of the other things that he had, understanding that we did use that to identify himself. So just wanted to share that that scenario with you. So again, I highly recommend just having that primer with you. You never know when you're going to need it. You never know when you are going to just come across, again, that just those weird scenarios that we're not expecting. Because that's one thing at first that kind of held me back from doing general notary work, because sometimes there's a lot of unexpected things. When you're with loan signings, a lot of times we get the documents ahead of time. We kind of know what to expect. You know, when we know what type of signing is, for the most part, we know what to expect. Now, of course, you're going to run into things with loan signings too, but it's pretty standard. Versus with general notary work, you don't always know what to expect. You don't always know. And like in this case, I was had been conversing with the attorney and not the actual client. Because when I do, a lot of times I will try to, when I'm speaking directly to the person that will be signing, I do try to ask them and say, hey, I would just need, valid ID and things like that, to give them a heads up of what I'm going to need, just to, give them the opportunity if they don't have that. I apologize, it's probably so dark. The sun is crazy right now. But I do give them the opportunity to say, here are some of the things that I need, just so they can have them prepared. But in this case, I had only spoken to the attorney, and she was kind of setting everything up. So I didn't have a chance to let him know what I needed, but it ended up working out. But again, I'm so glad that I had that primer with me, because had I not, I probably wouldn't have remembered exactly what I needed to do to identify those witnesses and have them take their oath and affirmation and moving forward. So hope that was helpful. Again, if you have any questions, comments, or anything like that, please let me know. Other than that, I'll see you in the next video. Bye, everybody.